everyone. Today we have the pleasure of having in our show Franco Petocchi, founder and managing partner at Accirculate. Franco brings a wealth of expertise, spanning over 25 years in consulting and industry leadership across the supply chain and logistics sector, with a deep commitment to advancing circular economy practices globally. As I said, is the founder and managing partner at Accirculate, which is a Brussels-based consulting firm specializing in circular economy and circular supply chains, something that we're going to discuss together today. And is also PM Squared Alliance is affiliated training provider, and maybe Franco is going to tell us more about that initiative, which is at the forefront of driving, again, transformative solutions and project management practices. He has worked for various organizations covering senior roles. I'm mentioning Accenture, Panalpina, DHL Group, but you can elaborate later. Franco, more recently, has been nominated as a member of the Circular Economies Alliance Strategic Foresight Board. He's originally from Italy, like me and Francesco. Studies in Sta Bocconi in Milan, and then basically educational experiences in top universities in both Europe and the States. Franco, it is truly a pleasure to have you in our show, and we look forward to discussing the evolution of global value chains with you.
Thank you very much for having me here. It's my pleasure to be part of this series, The Value of Future Value Chain. So let's start with myself then. It's inconvenient that I have to...
Tell us a little bit more about your journey.
Finally, I can talk about myself. So now my career started very early while I was continuing, of course, studying. So I immediately started from the operational sides. Back then I was at UPS. I started from the warehouse. That's why I know logistics very deep, from the floor up to the executive level. And then what changed my career back then, I was in Italy, was at the moment that I joined at that time a local operator, MIT in Italy, and was the period where the German Post went for a major acquisition campaigns, and which ended up with 500 acquisitions worldwide, including the Danzas Group and the DHL Group. So it's there, it was an amazing experience, and it's there when I, of course, developed my expertise. Mostly back then I was import manager and responsible of the central in Milan, and I had, even if it was in the early, at the early 2000, we already were at the cutting edge of technology and automation. So I implemented the first automation machine, and then we had the first RFID barcodes technologies, which at that time not all the companies had. And then, came maybe. Instead of course, for me, instead of remaining a local manager, I always look at the opportunity to go abroad, because I've always been interested and fascinated by, of course, US and other regions. And back then, in that environment, was the beginning of globalization, power of the German Post and those acquisitions. There was a kind of race between local managers, and the other companies to join the European headquarters for the major acquisition and major integration of Deutsche Post, DHL, and Danzas. To give you a magnitude, this has become after the first worldwide player of logistics and supply chain, with 500,000 employees, and you can imagine the scale if we consider subcontractors. So what brought me abroad was a good shot. So I always been an innovative kind of person, even if it was at that time I was in my 20s. And, along the automation, I decided that it was necessary to go for measurements and weight and volume measurements for big items, pallets, and so forth. They have an impact on the loading factor of trucks and trailers. And for a harbor manager, is a major concerned. And then with an innovation project with a specialized company, I managed to implement the first dynamic weight and volume measurement machine at the hub. And this resulted, to cut a long story short, in 5% increase in the turnover. And of course, that gave me the ticket to join the global headquarters. Back then was in Brussels for DHL. And I've been, of course, selected as one of the managers who design all the processes of DHL, what you see today, the DHL yellow. So a major integration. Just in operations, we were 250 people, and I was in
Wow.
charge, of a major project. In, for example, the label project, which maybe doesn't sound, but it's an important technology for the sorting and for track and tracing and so forth, as well as warehouse management, and the pickup and delivery. So we lived in an environment with a lot of opportunities to learn and with innovative approaches, and we also had the funds and the opportunity to do. Then at DHL, they decided to invest in me, so I became. They sponsored my executive MBA at Stabocconi. Was a moment of revelation. For me was good, to come back to school after such a long time. So in your 37, in fact, you know what? It's incredible. Those years, 2006, 2007. So it's when became father, and then I bought my new house and, the MBA, and then work at top level with a big job. Something that today sounds crazy that I couldn't do it, but I did. And as head of project portfolio, of course, I was in charge of driving for the executive leadership transitioning and the roadmap for in the digital division. We had, of course, still a lot to do in terms of integration. And after that, fortunately, came the financial crisis, difficult period, and I understood that this could have been a good opportunity to look at something else. So this was a moment of reflection. The market in logistics was also flat, and I think is one of the present of life that I received, because this brought me to UN environment. I also attended executive courses at the United Nations University in international cooperation. I was always being fascinated about, logistics and supply chain in this environment. This gave me, of course, another dimension. Soon I've been brought back at Panalpina with a vice president responsibility in the commercial side and on the top sales excellence program.
Yeah.
But after that, when at the time in 2015, I decided that was the moment for a major change. At first, I went to Accenture. I understood that digital was the new trend. Then I couldn't really miss it. So I've been there 3.5 years. I was in the Management Academy in Chicago. I've been in most of the innovation centers, working and as well with top clients, as well as also contributing, for example, to publication at the World Economic Forum, both on Industry 4.0, digital technology, drones in the logistics and supply chain area. And that gave me also the spin to look a little bit further. It was the time of the first circular economy package. In fact, I'm arrived in a circular supply chains. The European Commission decided to invest. I had the pleasure to work in the past with one of the pioneers of the circular economy, who was a consulting company who supported the Ellen MacArthur Foundation in designing the butterfly diagram. And so together with him, after reading a couple of books, I decided, okay, that's the way I want to go. Yeah, that's the way I want to. My business partner, we like, we like black and white. So he's a mechanical engineer, precise, standards driven, methodologies were very innovative. You can see energetic kind of
Pay attention
person.
to what you say. I'm a mechanical engineer too.
Yeah, but you work. If I may, I can see you. You know, your career change a bit in the sense that you're very exposing and so forth. He's one of these techie, in the
It's more
office and
into the
care.
stereotype.
Yeah, stereotype. Of course, many years in sustainability, supporting, standards and companies implementing a beginning energy management, then quality management in sustainability, and we decided, okay, let's launch Accirculate. It was 2019. And probably something I missed in the meantime. Before when I left Panalpina, I also met Francesco at MIT. Yeah, and that was the moment where, let's say, I moved from the concept of logistics into supply chain management, which still today for many people it's not clear exactly what it is and the difference. So with this in mind, I understood that the connection between supply chain and logistics, digital, green, and
Yeah.
sustainability was important. I hadn't got any doubt. We opened Accirculate, and it was great. Immediately at the beginning, we were there with the people, of course, in the European funded projects. And back then, I also had the opportunity to try and attempt together one of your colleagues also at UCL faculty is Professor Paul Eakins. Yeah,
Oh,
he's
yeah, of course, it's one of the big
yes,
names.
one of
Uh,
the big names in sustainability. And we try and attend for a sea shift project together. Unfortunately, then came the Brexit. It was not easy. And 2019 was not a perfect time to start with a new venture, since in 2020 the COVID hit the economy. But we kept on going, and we wanted to continue, and we could develop on top of the research and innovation activities also a professional training with PM Square, which is the project management methodology developed by the European Commission in the past 20 years. And it goes beyond, it goes on from project portfolio, program management to project management. And we became also affiliated training provider. And that's something very important for transition and for transformation in companies. And in addition to that, also we entered the space of leadership with some publication, presenting, also attending with both areas. Yeah, for example, at the European Parliament, we had events, or the European Commission. And since 2002, we managed, of course, to scale also our customer base and the projects in the circular supply chains area.
Fantastic. I mean, this is really an incredible set of experiences that you had over the years, and I'm really kind of curious to understand what is your perspective on the topic that we are discussing in the podcast. And I guess you have been involved in supply chain activities and logistics, from I guess in the moment that globalization became real, and of course globalization keeps evolving. And I guess the first question I would like to ask you, Franco, is do you see a regionalization of global value chains happening today? Is that something that you believe is real? What's your take on that?
No, great question. And that's one of the most important questions we have nowadays so far. In fact, I'm privileged because having started working a long time ago, I also felt what the globalization was. And trust me, we were afraid about globalization too, that now people are concerned on regionalization. It started, in my experience, a long time ago, more than people expected. Of course, there's a major focus now with the big wave of reshoring in North America, or Omnia shoring and French shoring. And Francesco definitely is area because it's area field of study. But started before, at the beginning, there were already a wave of reshoring, mainly related to quality issues in products. For example, a couple of examples. I remember also the Ferrari group. They try to have critical kind of manufacturing and production brought back. So it started a long time ago, and even under the presidency of, sorry, Obama. Yes, we we had already this wave starting. And now we can see an acceleration, although the geopolitical situation is making this exercise very unpredictable, uncertain. And what we talk in our conversations with clients as well as with professionals in our field of consulting of different sizes, we see that companies are a bit frozen at the moment. They really don't know where to move because there's a lot of unpredictability and regionalization, which is also close to circular supply chains because proximity plays a key factor, and it will to benefit from the values of circular supply chains in a more proximate environment. The instability and the unpredictability of the markets at the moment and the geopolitical situation is, in my opinion, hindering a bit the big investments because, of course, they need a longer time frame, to understand whether returns can be foreseen. I don't know, whether this will continue. In fact, it could be a phase because we also witnessing this change in the world order. But in our experience, in the last year, in particular with the recent election in US, there are concerns, to progress with the regionalization aspect.
So Franco, let me chime in here and let me understand the kind of based on your perspective, like main drivers impacting global supply chain, we can like wrap up and list down, as you mentioned, quality issues, geopolitics, and overall unpredictability. I remember Lapide from MIT claiming like 20 years ago something like abnormal to be the new normal in the future. Is this way in your vision?
Yeah, that it's definitely a zoom of reflection. For example, so we have big network. We connected to one of the top thinkers in the area of the New World Order, is distinguished Professor Andy Knight. He's writing a book in this, and the way he describes it is that we are at the moment in an interregnum. So the world order is changing, and in this interregnum, it's normal to have chaos, to have unpredictability. And this has an impact on the economy and ultimately on supply chains, where, in particular in the global supply chains we have now, investments are significant and require a lifespan longer. There's also the other area of concern is also, in particular, I try to refer my comments, of course, to the circular supply chains, is the area of critical raw materials and rare earth elements. Even recently, even a discussion now about Ukrainian war turned out to be about the subject of critical raw materials. We witness in order that before was a relatively controllable order, where supply was relatively stable. Today guarantee a constant supply of resources at an affordable price is very difficult. So what the global supply chains brought at that time was a wave that towards efficiency in particular. We have highly optimized supply chains. But in this way, what we think that they brought also a lot of rigidity into the system. And with the need for more adaptability and therefore resilience, there's a strong need to reshape the global supply chains and to consider whether reshoring or other type of approaches are, of course, are going to solve the situation in the short term.
So let me summarize here, wrapping up, if I understand correctly. You said, and I totally agree with that. We long lived an era with an equilibrium and global overall stability. Now, when you refer to like new order, you mean like the spheres of influence of major forces as a countries and related economy all over the world. You mainly refer to China and US, basically. So the relationship and the magnitude of these forces interacting each other and also interacting with the middle other countries in the middle of course, determining like turmoil. This turmoil calls back to adaptability and reorganization And this is like the main factor, the main topic, like calling, global supply chain development and turmoil as, the highest priority. Secondly, we cannot ignore, this is so related to ESG and sustainability like topics. And can you please wrap up in your perspective, your experience, which are the like three most important aspects, in the middle of this turmoil, top of your mind, on your desk, if you think about nowadays and sustainability, which are the top three you have on the table?
Well, that's definitely the question that we receive from all clients. They want to identify priorities and focus. So, in fact, ESG is a way to look from an investment point of view at sustainability. And sometimes also terminology and understanding around this area, it's important to reclarify for understanding. When we talk, for example, about circular economy or circular supply chains, sometimes it's misunderstood because the way that is being promoted and brought into the society, in business, was in contradiction to the linear economy, creating those kind of good and bad situation on the one end. But if we look at that in reality, when we talk about circularity, we're talking about material. Material means energy, and energy is translated in emissions.
But also rare material, like
from raw material upstream in the supply chain to the downstream. And so, because it's important sometimes to understand what does it mean. The difference that we're no more in a world where we can continue to sustain a model where we sell more, simply because it's no more economically sustainable. So there are no more access to affordable resources, and the disruptions are causing problems. When we look at circular supply chains, the difference is that they extend the value chain beyond the point of sale. So that's very important. So we start capturing the value from the reverse logistics and not just from the forward logistic on top. It's true, a certain business, they also add after sales opportunities and so forth, develop this sense, but with a completely different mindset. Now it's no more the time to leave those kind of value opportunities untaken. So we really have to unlock this.
Let's say for listeners, recycling not a green exercise, but we talk about real money now. Am I right?
Absolutely, Francesco. We preach it.
Okay.
In circular economy, recycling, it's the last of resort, and in theory, for some of the theory, is the last part of the linear economy and not of the circular.
And let's say also sourcing, especially strategic sourcing, like for special raw material, it's not like a good to have, option in your pocket, but it's a must have considering the current technology like going on now and in the future. So it is a strategic like topic to put top of the agenda and forward. And that's the main reason why sustainability, global supply chain, geopolitics, and overall finance, it's all connected right now. Am I right?
Absolutely right. But it goes also more than that. So the agility is driven by this constant and fast disruption. So disruptions are very fast from technology perspective, from substitutes of material, new entrants in the economy. You really have this kind of acceleration that you need to have agility. While in the past, global supply chains had the opportunity to optimize, counting on a relatively stable, market condition. And that's it. So here it's completely, first of all, leadership mindset change, and then of course an organizational mindset change. When we talk about supply chain design, it's no more just about the supply chain itself. It includes the business model and the product design. So the level of agility required is quite significant.
It's massive.
I'm glad that you spoke about the importance of disruption and business model innovation disruption, because as you know, I authored a book
Yeah.
about it. So I definitely support, I guess, what you see happening. Let me ask you something, Franco. So the type of strategic drivers that are, I guess, the base of the evolution of global value chains seem to be quite clear. But I'm wondering if there are more like operational reasons, like from an operations perspective, what is impacting on global value chains today?
No, that there are huge operational impact, in particular if we look at the recent wave of reshoring, uh, because supply chains are living systems too. So, and they are not just automated. There's leadership, there's management, there's people moving, there are subcontractors, suppliers, it's an entire ecosystem linked also to extends to local authorities, local institutions, different regulations, and so forth. So operationally, something, for example, we just witnessed, last year, if you look at the chip industry, chip sectors, major difficulties in that area, although it's always been something that that experience growth and development, and it was not just sufficient to reshore some operations because the local conditions, including, for example, if you look at human capital, if you look at how the design of the supply chain is impacted. It's not a mathematical exercise. The same is in Mexico and for example, where those industrial parks develop, but it's a living kind of business environment. So, and they go at a different pace as the previous one. There are different forces joining into it. And in today's that's what we started seeing, when if the supply chain management continues to be mostly engineering, a kind of optimization driven, mostly by numbers and engineering without extending into the other sources of value, which are natural capital, human capital, and very important social and relationship capital of the
Yeah.
six capitals framework, they are not going to win in the economy of the 21st century. And to this, we're going to publish a point of view in a couple of weeks. At the moment, we researching in the area of combining our approaches of circular supply chains, in looking at value sources from the other capitals and with a kind of management accounting. Because from the beginning of the century, we passed from almost 15% of market capitalization in intangible assets to 90%, and then it's not all captured. What you see, you can manage. What you don't see, you can't manage. And sometimes companies fail or have problems because they don't realize what kind of access they have to keep under control. So this is, I think we are in front, not of another industrial revolution, which the European Commission calls the fifth industrial revolution.
Yeah.
The significance of this change, it's a matter of a new economy.
And I'm glad you describe supply chains as living organisms, and a lot of stakeholders coming at play together in these ecosystems. Are there specific stakeholder groups and investors, clients come to mind that, in your opinion, are really pushing for this kind of evolution of supply chains and therefore driving change?
What I witness at the moment, there are many changes towards circularity that are not even captured, disseminated, with a circular or a sustainability change. They're simply there because they mean, sustainability from the economic aspects. Because I think a sector that is far advanced is automotive. Couple of years ago, just to tell you, so we had a very nice experience, visiting an automotive, one of the automotive leader in Europe, and we also had a funny story, because when we park, we enter in the wrong door, and we arrive in the center of the garden of the company. And we were afraid because it was the first visit with this big client. So we managed to arrive at the reception. Yeah. And at the end, we got out. There was a special exit, and nobody understood that. So, but they had a terrible security system if that happened. But when we had this conversation, we tried to convince, okay, let's have a look, at your spare parts. Of course, the design. Nobody wanted to open up the design of the car. It was impossible to really have a conversation about, okay, but if we have substitution, other kind of circularity strategies and approaches, it was impossible. Couple of years later, this, company became one of the foremost circular, producer, reconditioning spare parts and so forth. They're really making a lot of money, and they promote themselves. So this gives the magnitude and the speed of this change. Yeah. And that's exactly what we experience. So stakeholders here are all important. The two most important, in my opinion, both is business and policy. So they have to start collaborating for making sense together, and not trying to create, for example, regulations that are going to oblige, certain kind of things. And instead try to integrate, to have this kind of ecosystem approach where everybody can really thrive.
Mm.
Thanks for sharing, Franco. And also, that's an interesting point of view. The automotive sector example is very meaningful. Automotive is a tough, very competitive sector. It's always good to have as a benchmark. Do you have other examples or stories or project about these restructuring, let me say, processes you want to share with us?
Yeah, probably you mean something recent and so forth. Yeah, but
especially post-COVID, if because it seems like few years, but it's ages actually.
It's still, let's. I think automotive is probably one of the most advanced. Yeah, and
Sure.
but to give a reference, if we, there's the famous quote by Henry Ford. The second part, any color that he wants, so long as it is black. If it would have been now, this would have been a circular supply chain, implementation, because it's optimized. So when we talk about circularity, it's not creating obstacles. Yeah, of course, if there's another legislation obliging for more bureaucracy, something different. But when we're talking about circularity, it's something that's always existed. Since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, we had engineering resource efficiency, and that's circularity. If we look today, there are examples, I think it's magnificent. It's about applying mimicry in automotive. They're trying to utilize certain kind of structures of materials for becoming lightweight, or even regenerative kind of material like wood and so forth, in parts that before were just metals or aluminum. That's where, of course, this is happening at scale. Something that, trust me, when I was at the beginning of this in 2017, nobody was listening to me when I was talking about circular supply chains, or they couldn't understand. And many told me today, okay, Franco, that's what you were talking about. But this developed relatively fast, and it's going to impact several key technology for example, of the European market. They already identify an example we have very good is also related to drones. So it's a new driving setup that is going to develop both from the military, from the defense, and the civil sector.
Okay, so from my understanding, material probably one of the most important point, to succeed supply chain today, both for operational efficiency and from a sustainability point of view. Another factor could be technology, but overall, which are in your mind, main factors to succeed in supply chain today, in your perspective, your experience about what you see now?
No, it's absolutely, here is not just the technology, or let's say it's not technology alone, cannot solve. It's a combination. First of all, it's important to come back to what we call also design thinking. Yeah, system design thinking. Yeah, so because it's a system, supply chain is a system, and we live in a system. And it's very important, for example, from the product design to the business model, that and then the supply chain and the operations, that this is related.
So you say the entire framework to be restructured, not only a process that is part of the framework, but the entire framework since the very beginning, how you conceptualize a product from sourcing to making and planning and all the other processes till the end back end to the beginning, right?
Let's take the example of automotive, electric cars from electric vehicles for China and our European. So they cannot transform and adapt so quickly to sell the same kind of products. And that's a matter of business model, matter of product design, how you market it, and so forth. It doesn't matter what kind of supply chain, optimization or try the techniques. So the responsiveness of the proactiveness required. So it's so strong that the only way to gain competitive advantage, that's of course, I'm on the sales side here for circular supply chains, is to conceptualize already at the beginning, in a way that you can benefit for the entire value chain beyond the point of sale. And also maybe products that they are durable, extending the life of products and so forth. If you really manage to capture this value, you can make it your competitive advantage. There are players, for example, in electronics, mobile phones. There's a players a couple of years ago. It was almost impossible to think that a new mobile phone could come out without. I have a fair phone because I'm circular. I don't know whether it's a problem if I mention the company, but
No,
this
fine.
is a circular one, or others. For example, a couple of years ago, I have two daughters. A couple of years ago, one of my daughters asked me to buy a phone. We decided to go for a second hand. Was very easy to find, 100 euros and so forth. Yeah, she wanted a specific brand, so we did that. 3 years after, my second daughter needs a phone, and now there's a secondary market on these, and you can find the same phone for less than 320 in the shop. So this is the speed, and you cannot work in silo supply chain, product, and business model. What we witness now at the moment to win, it's very important to align those three elements and become agile in all the three.
This is very, very interesting, Franco. Now, you are, I guess, immersed in many interesting initiatives. Is there a specific one that you wanted to share with us that could be, I guess, interesting as an example of value chain evolution, value chain of the future, something you had the opportunity to work on directly? Any examples come to mind?
No, there's something we are very proud of. And because we contributed, was not a project, was a consultation. We operate in Europe, and of course, when you talk about global supply chains, of course, we are exposed globally, but we basically provided some consultation under the umbrella of the European Commission to the Drone Strategy 2.0, which is the legislative train for the drones, fast-growing sector. And back then, we started, I think, 2021. Beginning was mostly an operational approach in terms of legislations, how to operate those kind of new technology. But we brought in the eco-design aspects and explained also the criticality in terms of critical raw materials and rare elements. We also brought there the importance of the dual use, which in the past it's a regulation that was mainly driven to avoid knowledge transfer from military to the civil and avoid certain kind of traffic. But today, in front of the pivotal times that we are in Europe, if we look also at the report done by Mario Draghi, the competitiveness, the foreseen investments in defense, we have to think that those kind of technologies that they have, like the drones, dual use, we suggested back then, already in 2022, to form a European supply chain. So Europe cannot win, for example, alone, just single country going alone on a supply chain. This was the perfect example of a new sector developing in Europe, And this is what we suggested. And we're very proud because it has been adopted in November 2022. You can see Accirculate is even mentioned in the strategy paper. And on top of that, we found that we were on the right track because this has been repeated in Mario Draghi's report, the same kind of concept. So, and together with that, even if the circular economy sometimes is not explicitly indicated, he talks about downstream industries. He speaks about, critical raw materials and so forth. So circularity, it's about competitive advantage. It's not a compliance obligation. And this is how companies, they look like in the supply chain today from what we witness.
That's a powerful message, Franco, and thank you for sharing. We are closing this episode, so please give us some candy. What's your vision? What's your vision next 5-7 years? Which are most important factors, or most important topics to point our attention, like to succeed and drive the change, in the immediate future we face tomorrow?
No, thanks for the question. That's the ones, everybody's waiting, in particular if you are a consulting company. So definitely we should look in supply chain at two important things. Human capital. New technology, artificial intelligence, will come, will help us, but there are new rules of the game. So we need people because the reshaping and the adaptability requires experience and empower, forces to happen constantly and to learn from those changes. So human capital is very, very important. And we should go away from the efficiency-driven approaches that sometimes we have in mature global supply chains. Here is key. That's the first thing. The second one, and this is another underestimated, is social and relationship capital. So we know how much important are suppliers, how important is the relationship with local, authorities, sometimes with community. Those two, together with the natural capital, they have to be brought back into the balance sheet. We should
I love
be
to hear
able.
that. I love to hear that because it's sorry if I stop you, because
Please.
it's a shifting move from the cent less paradigm, especially with supplier. 2 cents less, that you're my supplier. Forgetting all the rest and forgetting what is the overall cost of ownership. Please go ahead.
Yeah. No, these are the ones, and we also, now there is a way to, of course, and this is part of our research together with one of our partners. We mentioned one. I'm a member of the Strategic Foresight Board of the Circular Economy Alliance with renewed pioneer and people in this area. And the second one is Rethinking Capital Foundation, world leader in the area of normative accounting, which is a side accounting. So we have to start managing, control all assets, tangible and intangibles. This is key. The ones who still rely on the efficiency-driven approach. In the past, we had the two paradigms were efficiency and growth in business management. I don't know whether at UCL, Paolo, School of Management was the same. Today, the paradigm is between efficiency and resilience, which is delivering value. And this is what absolutely, in our opinion, is the key to be a winning organization and a winning supply chain in the 21st century.
Thanks for sharing, Franco. It's been great to have you here. Let me spend some couple of sentences here before we close and final talks. As you mentioned before, we met more than 10 years ago in a cold room at MIT in Cambridge. I remember we were young, like it was a research, and we developed our topic like pioneering, like in the related area. So I'm so happy you're here. I'm so happy these topics are connected, and I'm so happy you can represent for real, a great player working in the intersection of supply chain and sustainability, like for 20, maybe 30 years, highlighted as two different areas and now totally merging. and totally impacting, and vice versa, the geopolitical and financial scene. And it's so important to share these thoughts in a one wrap only, to give and provide one flavor only because of their related interconnection. Any thoughts, Paolo, before we close?
No, I think it was brilliant the way you framed the conversation, connecting the topic of supply chain to product and business models. I think that's definitely the way to look at these things, and any kind of business model evolution or supply chain evolution has to make sense financially, and has to make sense for the stakeholders involved in these processes of change. I definitely found your key messages very sound. It was really a pleasure, Franco, to have you on our show, and congratulations for all the good work you are doing.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure. And looking forward to reconnect in future. Thank you.
Thanks, Franco.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed this discussion, we invite you to like and share this episode on your social media. Enjoy the rest of your day.